I want to describe a specific kind of failure, the kind that doesn't really feel like failure. The patents are filed, the trademarks are registered. Maybe you even got a positive search report, the kind that your IP counsel sends over with a tone that implies you should be pleased. And you are, a little. You've done the work, you've invested. The portfolio looks solid. And yet, nothing moves. Customers aren't asking about it, investors aren't reacting to it, competitors aren't adjusting just because of it. The market continues exactly as it was, apparently completely unmoved by the fact that you are technically very well protected. This is the situation nobody really warns you about. Not because it's rare, it's extremely common, but because it doesn't look like a problem from inside. It looks like progress. You have assets. They are documented. They're legally sound. What more do you want? I am Maria Boicova-Wynants, and this is What Would You Do? Today's episode is about the most comfortable trap in IP strategy, the portfolio that looks strong and does nothing. Because here's the thing. Irrelevance doesn't announce itself. It just slowly becomes the context you operate in. And by the time you notice it, you might have spent years protecting something that was never connected to anything that mattered. The instinct when you have a strong portfolio and nothing is happening is to assume the market just hasn't caught up yet, that the value is there, it just needs time to be recognized. So you wait. Maybe you even file more, you extend the portfolio, you add jurisdictions, you tighten the claims, you build what I will call, without apology, a beautiful portfolio. Technically clean, well structured, broad claims, carefully drafted, professionally managed, and completely invisible to anyone who actually makes decisions. The second instinct, and this one is slightly more sophisticated, but equally wrong, is to communicate harder. More investor decks with IP slides, more press releases about filings, more LinkedIn posts about strengths of the position. As if the problem is that people don't know about your IP, and awareness will create relevance. It won't. Because your problem is not visibility. The problem is connection. And those are entirely different problems with entirely different solutions. Communicating harder about something that isn't connected to any real decision just makes you louder. It doesn't make you relevant. And the distinction, this one, it matters. Because loud and irrelevant is actually a worse position than quiet and irrelevant. At least the quiet version hasn't told everyone. Let me tell you what actually is happening when IP is strong but nobody cares. You've been treating IP as an asset in isolation, and it isn't one. IP only has value inside a system. It needs a counterparty, someone who wants what you have, or fears what you can do, or is blocked by what you've built. Without a counterparty, IP is not an asset. It's just a document, and a very expensive, very well drafted document that sits in a database somewhere and has no effect whatsoever on anyone's behavior. Think about what IP actually does when it works. A patent changes a competitor's product roadmap. They have to design around you, and that costs them time and money and market position. A trademark makes customer choice easier. Your brand carries meaning that they trust, and that trust translates into real economic value. A trade secret creates a structural advantage in a negotiation. You know something others don't. And that asymmetry is power. All of that is downstream of one thing: someone else's decision being affected by your position. If no one's decision is being affected, the mechanism isn't working, but not because the IP is weak, because it's disconnected. And here's what makes this particularly insidious. The people managing the portfolio are usually measuring the wrong things. Claim breadth, jurisdiction coverage, filing frequency, grant rates, these are all metrics of legal strength. None of them are metrics of strategic relevance. You can score absolutely perfectly on every legal metric and still have a portfolio that does nothing. I have seen this more than once. It's more common than anyone in this industry is comfortable admitting. And the point is that the loss here is not dramatic. That's what makes it so costly. You don't lose a lawsuit. You don't lose a filing window. You don't have a competitor crisis or investor confrontation. You just lose time, quietly, continuously, while resources flow into protecting a position that isn't connected to anything that moves the business. And the compounding effect of that is essentially very brutal, because every year of maintaining a disconnected portfolio is a year of budget that didn't go into product, that didn't go into distribution, that didn't go into talent. It's a year of management attention that went into IP governance instead of market strategy. It's a year of positioning that emphasized protection over relevance. And relevance in a market is what actually creates defensibility. The deepest loss, though, is focus, because a company that believes its IP is strong has a very specific blind spot. It stops asking whether the strategy underneath the IP is strong. The portfolio becomes like a substitute for strategic clarity. It feels like an answer, but it isn't. We are protected. That's not a business position. It's a legal condition. And confusing the two is where value disappears. So, what would I do? First of all, I would take my strongest piece of IP and try to break it. Not legally, commercially. I would sit down with the product team, not with the legal team, and ask one question: where does this actually change a decision? Not where it could theoretically create value. Where does it actually, today, in the real market as it exists, change what someone does? It can be, I don't know, a customer's purchase decision, competitor's product map, partner's negotiating position, investor's risk assessment, distributor's exclusivity terms, doesn't matter. If it shows up in at least one of those, specifically, concretely, verifiably, then you have something to work with. If it doesn't show up anywhere, you don't have a strong position. You have a strong document at best. And the work is to figure out what would need to change for the document to become a position. Second, I would build a counterparty map. For each significant asset in the portfolio, I want to be able to name, and not describe in general terms, but actually name who this matters to and why. Who would pay for access to this? Who is currently blocked by this, or would be if they tried to move into this space? Who would have to redesign their product or process if we enforced this? If you can't answer those questions with specifics, The asset doesn't have a counterparty yet. And IP without a counterparty, this is not leverage, this is inventory. This exercise is deeply uncomfortable, but it reveals quickly how many assets in a typical portfolio are legally real and commercially absolutely hypothetical. And it forces a choice. Either find a counterparty or stop treating that asset as a strategic resource. Third, I would radically narrow the active portfolio and concentrate investment on what's connected. This goes against every instinct of portfolio management, which tends towards expansion, more coverage, more jurisdictions, broader claims. But breadth without connection is overhead. It is not strength. A smaller, sharper portfolio, even if it's just 3 assets, but that are genuinely connected to real business outcomes, will outperform a large portfolio of disconnected filings at any single time. Not because it's better IP, because it's IP that's doing something. And IP that does something compounds. IP that doesn't just costs. Fourth, I would restructure how IP is reported internally. Out all those metrics of legal strengths, grant rates, claim counts, jurisdiction coverage, in metrics of commercial connection. How many active licensing conversations does this support? How many competitor design rounds has this forced? How many investor conversations has this changed? What is the estimated value of the blocking position in the current market? This shifts in reporting, they change the behavior. Teams start building IP with a counterparty in mind. Counsel starts asking commercial questions, not just legal ones. The portfolio starts serving the business instead of existing somehow alongside it. Being technically right is not enough. I know that's not what IP professionals are trained to hear, and that's not what founders want to hear after years of building a portfolio. But it's the truth. And I'd rather say it clearly than let you spend another year optimizing something that isn't connected to anything that matters. Legal strength is a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient one. Relevance is the actual test. And relevance is always external. It lives in someone else's decision, someone else's behavior, someone else's reaction to what you've built. If that reaction isn't happening, the work is not to file more, it's to reconnect. So next time you feel reassured because your IP is strong, just pause for a moment and ask the question that actually matters. And that question is brutally simple. Who cares? If you can answer that specifically with names and mechanisms and real decisions, you have a strong position. If you can't, you have documentation. And documentation, however beautiful, does not win markets. The gap between a strong portfolio and a relevant one is where I spend a lot of time with companies, not rebuilding what they have, just reorienting it, asking for each asset, what is this actually for? Who is this actually for? What decision does it change? Those questions, they feel simple, but finding honest answers to them is much harder than most IP reviews ever go. Thanks for listening to What Would You Do? In the next episode, what would you do if you have to decide without enough information? Which is always the case. Because relevance is one challenge. But what happens when you can't even see clearly enough to know where this relevance lives or might live? Deciding under genuine uncertainty, not the comfortable kind, the kind when you are waiting for permission, is its own discipline. And we are going there next. Until then, think clearly, decide better.